Welcome to Her Fantasy Football, Take 2. You can hear us on Blog Talk Radio / Her Fantasy Football and on iTunes. Make sure to subscribe to us on herfantasyfootball.com so you can get our newsletter where we'll give you our 4 ingredients on our fun, free FanDuel game Diced. And a friendly reminder, make sure to tune into our radio show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio from 9 to 11 Eastern on Saturday night. Also, you can chat with us on Twitter at HerFantasyFB and on Facebook / HerFantasyFootball. I'm your host, Courtney Kirby.
And I'm Ashley Williams.
And I'm Brandon Marianne Lee.
We tried recording this show a little bit earlier, so if you're watching us on YouTube, we're back. Hi. It's only almost 3 a.m. in the Eastern time zone, so we're going to make this piffy. Get them out of your lineups, guys. It's a lot of teams. Teams on bye. Los Angeles Rams, Miami Dolphins, New York Giants, Pittsburgh Steelers, the San Francisco 49ers, and the Baltimore Ravens. Dun, 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 dun. Wah. In reality, though, I mean, there's only 2 teams that really have players, so it's fine.
Yeah, I was actually looking at my thing. I was like, I don't have that many players to switch up.
I didn't have anybody.
3
this week. I was like, oh, okay. I have Antonio Brown in a league and OBJ in a league, but that's it. So
some could have Gurley, some would have OBJ, like you said, Ajayi, Tannehill, obviously.
Whenever I say Ajayi, I think of acai.
The fruit?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's yummy, so this is a good thing.
Boom. There you go. Well, let's get into the football, shall we? Thursday night game. The Jacksonville Jaguars 2-4, the Tennessee Titans 3-4. And I will have to say the Jacksonville Jaguars no longer have any must-starts this week. So Allen Robinson, I would have ranked him even lower if I could. I have him ranked number 27. Listen, Robinson has only caught 50% of his targets this season. He only caught 2 of 8 targets last week. This makes 2 bad games in a row against easy defenses. So, yeah, this is another good matchup for him, but I'm not playing him, okay? I'm not. I get it if you're in deep league, you probably have to play him. Sure, fine. But, guys, it's not good. And looking forward for everybody on this team, if you own any of these players, their matchups get tough towards the end of the season. In week 12, they play Buffalo. Week 13, Denver. Week 14, Minnesota. Week 15, Houston. That is not good for the fantasy football soul. This week, I will say Marquise Lee and Allen Hurns are both sleepers, flyers, whatever you'd like to call them. You know Marquise Lee is going to catch his targets, which is great. His percentage is fabulous. He averages 6 targets. He catches 5 targets. So it's very good. You know that is going to happen. He did just see his first 100-yard game. He still hasn't found the end zone, though. As for Allen Hurns, he's only found the end zone once this year. He has yet to have a game over 75 yards, but he does average 7.5 targets a game. So you have people on bye. You know that these people are at least are part of the game. What they do with those targets, I can't tell you. But in PPR, at least you know that they're there. Julius Thomas, he's listed as questionable. He's questionable for your roster right there on the cuff at ranked number 12 for our tight ends. It's tough out there for tight ends, you guys. It really is. He did find the end zone last week. I know. He did find the end zone last week, so that is good. So it's a good thing he's a tight end, not a wide receiver, because he might just be good enough. As for the bench, you guys, Blake Bortles is bad this year. Really bad. He's really struggled since his bye week, and I have to tell you, he has the exact same fantasy points as Ryan Tannehill.
Not okay. That's not okay.
I think you all know how we feel about Tannehill. As far as TJ Yeldon and Chris Ivory, you guys, I'm not starting either one of them. I don't like either one of their the way that they timeshare. It's just not good, okay? And the Titans are actually decent. They give up the 10th fewest fantasy points to running backs. So for me, they're on my bench. If you have to play one, it's Ivory. And, of course, Jacksonville defense. It's a great matchup. I get it. No. They're last in the league. To, of course, the New Orleans Saints. Titans.
So this one can be pretty quick. DeMarco Murray, you are playing him week in, week out. You don't care what matchup, who they're playing. He's one of the few solo running backs in the league, and he's on fire. He's solid. You're playing him. Now, Delaney Walker is an interesting one because he had 84 yards off 8 targets. He caught 7 of them and a touchdown, but he did suffer a chest injury. He is no longer on the injury report, which is the good news, but it's a tough matchup where Jacksonville actually gives the 5th fewest points to tight ends, and he's a little bit dicey, so he's been pretty hot and cold all season. But the reality is you probably do not have any other tight ends with more upside than Delaney Walker. So he may not do great for you, but you still have to play him. So he technically still falls into the must-start category, unfortunately, because of that. Now, Marcus Mariota had a great game. He was 20 for 37 for 232 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. And we told you he was in a nice little stretch with some easy matchups. This is a mediocre matchup. Jacksonville gives up the 14th most fantasy points, which just makes them a very average defense against quarterbacks. But it is going to get a little bit harder in a couple weeks here. So if you need to stream, these are the weeks that you stream Mariota, and then you're going to need to kind of tail him off because his schedule does get a little bit more difficult. Now, Rashard Matthews is somebody that didn't do great. He only had 37 yards, another very hot and cold person. But the Jacksonville gives up the 8th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So if you're looking for someone that's going to have potential upside, Rashard Matthews is someone that you could possibly plug in this week if you got a lot of Giants on your team, maybe some Steelers, and you need someone that's a potential upside. Rashard Matthews is someone that you can look at. But do not look at Tajay Sharp. I've said it for weeks now. He is doing horrible. He did have a sprained knee, despite playing a surprisingly large amount of snaps. He was 61 of 74 of the offensive snaps, which is a little bizarre for someone who's got a sprained knee and who hasn't been producing for your team for weeks. I'm not sure what the coaching decision there was, but he did not practice on Monday. So the status is kind of we don't really quite know what's going on with him. I don't love it. Stay away from Sharp.
And we have another London game. 9:30 Eastern. Wake up, set your lineups. The Washington Redskins 4-3. The Cincinnati Bengals 3-4.
I'm disappointed. This is our second round, and you still didn't sing Fergie.
No.
You're the only one
Sing
that
it.
immediately comes to mind with Fergie.
London, London, London.
London, London, London.
There you go.
Is that good? Is that good?
It's a song.
I don't know if I know it.
It's old now.
You would know it if you heard it.
Well, Washington. Kirk Cousins had a bad week 1, but since then he scored 17.8 fantasy points per game as an average. It's nuts, you guys. He's got this really high floor. This is a great matchup, actually, because Cincinnati gives up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks, which surprised me. It might surprise you. Throw him in. Throw him in. And Jamison Crowder is listed as questionable. Should be fine. He caught 7 of his 9 targets last week for 109 yards against Detroit, getting a lot of work in the slot. Detroit's defense is terrible, but still, I'm playing him this week. Must start for me personally, and he's still available in a lot of leagues. Yeah. I mean, I picked him up a lot of places. I know my husband picked him up a lot of places because I kept being like, dude, go get Jamison Crowder. He looks over his stats and goes, wow, I think this guy's for real. I was like, yeah. I also do this for a job.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah. Gosh, hello. Anyway, sleepers. Josh Doxson went on IR on October 21st. That means he's going to be out for 8 weeks. That means if you are not playing Dynasty, get him out. Bye. I do love Josh Doxson rest of career. I guess not rest of season, rest of career, but it is what it is. Vernon Davis is also questionable with a groin injury, likely to play. Last week he caught 6 passes for 79 yards. If Jordan Reed does not play, you do play Vernon Davis. And actually, I like him a lot better than a lot of tight ends this week, so he might be available. And Jordan Reed is questionable. Supposedly, he is in the final stages of concussion protocol. You have to get cleared by going to an independent doctor. He did that last week and was not approved. He's going to do it again, but we'll know by Thursday because I have to get on a plane to go to London.
Yep.
Okay.
At least he won't be a game time decision because those are the worst.
No. Yeah, they are the worst. So he'll either be in London and playing or not. Or he'll have a setback because that's what keeps happening with this poor man. Anyway, Chris Thompson and Rob Kelly can be considered because, well, first of all, Matt Jones is questionable. He did not practice on Wednesday due to a knee injury. His fumbling issues also have him in the doghouse. Thompson got 12 carries last week and went 73 yards and also caught 7 passes for 40 additional yards. 7 passes. Wow. Yep. However, if Matt Jones doesn't go, Rob Kelly is actually going to be a much larger part of this offense than you think. He's going to be the traditional ball carrier. He's an undrafted rookie who had a nice preseason, but we don't know much other than that, and that he had 1 catch for a yard and a touchdown last week, and so far he only has 17 carries on the season, but he's averaging 6.1 yards per carry. So upside maybe. So he's also someone that later in the week, depending on what happens, could be an ad. And also questionable, Deshaun Jackson, hamstring and shoulder. He hasn't had a game with over 55 yards or a touchdown since week 3. Bench.
Bengals.
So Andy Dalton had a great game, which we thought he would. He was 19 of 28 for 308 yards and 2 touchdowns, including the one very glorious Hail Mary to AJ Green that we'll discuss shortly. He's someone that you can stream. It is a tough matchup, is the fact that surprisingly, the Washington defense has only allowed 1 touchdown max out of the last 6 games to opposing quarterbacks.
Crazy.
So that's interesting. Now, can my red rifle break that pattern? I think so. So I think you can go ahead and stream Andy Dalton. AJ Green, they've got some good matchups. So this is why I think Andy Dalton's going to be able to do this, because not only do they have AJ Green on this team, but they've got Brandon LaFell, who is also playing really great. So AJ caught all of his 8 passes for 169 yards. And one of those was that 48-yard touchdown that was the bomb in the end zone. And he had this amazing catch, just bringing it in and catching it out as he's falling like 3 defenders around him. It was amazing. It was great. But Washington has basically given up a little bit less than 100 yards to 5 different receivers thus far this year, and AJ Green is one of the top receivers in the league. So I think he will also be able to get around 100 yards, and I'm sure at least that 1 touchdown that Andy Dalton will throw. And Brandon LaFell might get that other touchdown because he is a legit option here. He is legit. He was 4 of 5 for 83 yards and a touchdown. He's been doing really, really well over the past few games. He's someone that you definitely can think about and is not 100% owned in a lot of leagues. So go search for Brandon LaFell if he's not out there. Now, on our part take of this, I went on probably a 10-minute tirade about Jeremy Hill, mainly just because I was angry because he's on my team. But I do want to tell you to be a little bit nervous because he did have a lot of yards, but he had 9 touches. Only 9 touches did he get the 168 yards off of it, which was completely ridiculous compared to what Giovanni Bernard had, whereas he had 17 touches. So the ratio is off there. Right now, Bernard is getting the bulk of the carries. So still don't get panicked about Giovanni Bernard. You can still play him because right now, the past 3 weeks, he has had at least 15 touches each week. So he is still the one that's getting the carries. So do not be afraid of playing him. And then I just have to mention Tyler Eifert because I know he's somebody that you guys are thinking about. He only had 1 catch for 9 yards. And Washington's got a really tough matchup. They give the 12th fewest points to tight ends. But if you've been holding on to Tyler Eifert this entire time, you're playing him because why else did you hold on to him? So, but my issue is with a team that's only allowed 1 touchdown, is Tyler Eifert going to be one of the guys that gets them? I just don't know. I don't think so.
I hope so.
And Brandon LaFoil. It's late, and I'm just sad that no one got to hear your Jeremy Hill rant.
I mean,
another time,
another week. It'll be there.
It'll be
there.
It's Jeremy Hill.
Let's move on to the 1 p.m. Eastern games. Kansas City Chiefs 4-2 at the Indianapolis Colts 3-4.
You literally have one must start on this team right now, and that is Spencer Ware. And I do not want anyone to be nervous about the potential Jamal Charles situation. Spencer Ware is the bell cow right now. Jamal Charles is still not healthy. I'll get into him in a second here. But even when he's played, Spencer Ware has still gotten the bulk of the carries. He got a 77 yards off 17 carries last week, plus an additional 54 yards in the air and a touchdown. And this is a great matchup. The Colts give up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. So there should be no fear with Spencer Ware. He is green light go and will probably have one of the best weeks in the league. So Feel good about him. Alex Smith is someone that you could stream. Probably have better options. He had a pretty good game last week, as Brandon and Courtney both projected that he would have.
Woo!
Yeah, we did. Alex Smith.
That Russian touchdown, baby.
But I have to bring it down because he is thrown for fewer than 25 passes.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
It's a
matter how they
Russian
get their
touchdown.
fantasy points, as long as they get them.
It's a little concerning, but it is a good match.
I'm doing the Hillary Clinton shimmer.
The shimmy.
Shimmy. Hillary Clinton.
I always think of Shaq, that little meme you see of Shaq. When
Oh, yeah, the little meme of Shaq. Yeah.
that's what I always think of. What was that from? Like one of the Gold Bond commercials, maybe? I don't know.
Oh, so good. So good. I want everyone to shimmy. There should be a Trump shimmy too. We should all just shimmy.
Well, let's hope
shimmy,
he shimmies for you because it's a pretty decent matchup. So we'll see what Alex Smith can do. And they finally let him air the ball out a little bit last week. That was surprising. I was like, oh my gosh, he threw for more than 10 yards.
Tyreek.
Yeah, well, yes. So Tyreek, I'm going to tell you right now, do not go pick him up because he had one great play. That is not common, especially in this offense. Jeremy Maclin, their top receiver, can't seem to get past 40 yards every week like last week. So don't play him. As I've already told you, Travis Kelce is dicey. He only had 2 catches for 24 yards, and he hasn't been performing well the last few weeks. But if you're going to play him, this is the week because the Colts give up the 8th most points to tight ends. So if he's going to bounce back, it's on delicious matchups like this. So look for Travis Kelce to bounce back. We already talked about Jamal Charles and the fact that he didn't play much last week because his knee just didn't feel right. There was swelling. He's been limited in practice. It doesn't look like he's going to be unleashed anytime soon. So again, do not put him in your lineups. I would say no. And I already told you to not play Tyreek Hill because again, one hit wonder. Don't do it to yourself.
The Colts. Brandon.
Andrew Luck has become a must start. Even though he's always under pressure and he should probably be dead by now, he is definitely someone who continues to get 20 plus fantasy points. So get him in your lineups. T.Y. Hilton, hello.
Hello. Knock, knock. You're
So I'll
awesome.
say he scored a touchdown in 4 of his last 5 games.
Love him.
Frank Gore, slow and steady, man. If 13 points is your jam, he's your guy.
Hey,
He'll
I'll take
never have
13
a 20
points.
Absolutely. He's never got 25 points, but he's always a solid double digit. Thanks,
Perfect.
Frank Gore. Thank you. Liz, only 4 touchdowns of the season, but 6 teams on bye. What are you going to do? Sleepers, Jack Doyle. Last week, he was a beast in an easy matchup. And he didn't have any competition for targets. Now, this week he goes up against the Chiefs who give up the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Also, it looks like Dante Moncrief is going to get back into the lineup this week, which is going to definitely take away from some of those Jack Doyle targets. Dwayne Allen, though, is still doubtful due to an ankle injury. He's week to week, so at least those targets will still go towards Doyle. Moncrief, as I said, officially listed as questionable. He has not played since week 2 due to a shoulder injury. Watch those reports, but technically the Chiefs get the 2nd most points to opposing wide receivers, so it's something to watch. On the bench, Philip Dorsett didn't do anything when Dante Moncrief was out. Why do you think he would do something if he's in? He's also questionable with a hamstring injury. And Chester Rogers is the best name in the league, but you're not playing him. Bye.
Bye. Arizona Cardinals 3-3-1 at the Carolina Panthers 1-5.
Holy mackerel. 3-3-1. The 1 is what just killed me last week.
Oh man, kicker
So good.
meltdown.
Melt
good.
down. It was
So
epic.
good. I loved it.
Oh
I
my
love
gosh.
defensive games
Seeing
like that.
sad little Chandler's face just sitting there on the sidelines, and then Hauschka misses, and it was like this glimmer of light in his eyes, like it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It was like, thank God.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, if Stephen Hauschka's missing, what's happening? Yeah, it's bad news over there. But David Johnson forever. I have a Trapper Keeper, and it has him in it instead of the New Kids on the Block.
He's great.
I've become
Perfect.
an adult.
He's the only person on the field last week.
He's the only
He's
person on the
amazing.
field pretty much every week. And the good
Awesome.
news is that I don't care what matchup it is, you're playing him. I told you that I didn't like Carson Palmer at the beginning of the season. I said that his passes didn't look right. He has not been a strong quarterback candidate for fantasy owners. He's questionable, limited at practice due to a hamstring injury. This is a great matchup, though. Carolina gives up the third most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. If you held on to him, you have to play him. So at least there's a glimmer of hope this week. He's only thrown 2 touchdowns, though, in the last 4 games. Carolina also gives up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Larry, let's just talk about this wide receiver, shall we? Let's just talk about him. Talk about them all. Larry Fitzgerald started off the season with 2 big games, but it's weird. He had a big game with Drew Stanton, and then it kind of fell off a cliff here. He's never had less than 7 targets in a game, though, so I think you have to start him because he always has upside. John Brown is questionable for a hamstring injury again. Yeah. He had to miss last week's show due to last week's game.
It was a show.
It was our show. Well, it was a show. It was a show for Chandler Catanzaro. But,
it was a PBS show.
In-house show.
Real slow moving.
Real slow moving.
So
it made Downton Abbey look like Diehard. And it was fine. But it is what it is. So, he had to miss last week's game due to sickle cell trait in his leg. Like some sort of like blood clot. I don't know. It's very weird. Again, don't play in altitude, please. It makes me so cranky. However, he should be active this week. That's what they're telling us. He had a big week in week 4 when he put up 144 yards, but not much sense and no touchdowns so far this year. Which leads us to Michael Floyd, whose imperfections have been covered by touchdowns. He only has 3 on the season, but still that's, decent compared to everyone else. It's been every other week. So if you look at the pattern, to be fair, this is his week. But at the same time, he has yet to go over 65 yards all season. J.J. Nelson had a nice game. John Brown's back, no go. And don't look for a tight end.
All right, the Panthers. Listen, the Arizona Cardinals defense is much better than their offense. So this is going to be a little bit of a tough road for Carolina Panthers. That's 1-6. Greg Olsen, no, we have him ranked number 2. Listen, you're not benching Greg Olsen. You can't do it. I know this is not a great matchup. In fact, Arizona gives up the absolute fewest fantasy points to tight ends. But who do you have better than Olsen? You tell me. You tell me.
0
you can give me an honest comparison on Twitter, I'll consider it. But other than that, you're starting him. Calvin Benjamin, again, Benjamin hasn't found the end zone since week 4. This is a tough game for him. I would not expect more than 7 fantasy points. And if 7 fantasy points is enough for you to play Calvin Benjamin, then you should play Calvin Benjamin. But I can't tell you it's going to be any more than that. I'm going to put Cam Newton in my sleepers, even though we have him ranked in the top 10. I just can't do it, you guys. If you have a solid quarterback, too, I would consider playing him over Newton. Arizona has given the 4th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They have yet to allow a quarterback to throw over 300 yards and have given up only 5 passing touchdowns on the season. Russell Wilson only had 8.7 fantasy points last week against Arizona. So, it's rough out there, you guys.
He's been rough all year himself.
Almost in that category of the Minnesota and Denver when it comes to teams. Jonathan Stewart, another tough matchup. The Cardinals go up the 2nd fewest fantasy points to running backs. They've only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns this season. I know he had a huge game the week before bye, and he should be close to 100%. So if you need to play him, I get it, but I hope you have a better option this week. Carolina's defense, listen, either they're going to get 0 or they're going to get 15. It's one or the other. If they can keep the defensive points that you automatically get at the beginning of the game and hold them to field goals like other people have, then they can have a good game. But if David Johnson gets away from Carolina, they will fall apart real fast because Carolina's defense has been awful this year. Absolutely awful. So it is a risk, but it could pay off. Could also possibly get you negative points. It has happened to teams. Let's move move on to the Oakland Raiders 5-2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 3-3.
I can safely say you should not start either of these defenses. Am I right, ladies?
Oh, you're right. You're right.
So it's going to be a high-scoring game, which is really exciting for fantasy owners that are starting offensive prospects. So David Carr has been in a bit of a drought. He's thrown only 1 touchdown in 4 of his 7 outings. But I think that he'll have to throw to keep up with Tampa Bay against the Oakland Raiders defense. So get it together. That's what I gotta say about that. Cooper was so disappointing last week with only 4 catches for 29 yards. Yuck. But frankly, rookie cornerback Jalen Ramsey of the Jacksonville Jaguars was just really good. He held him in check. He did a good job. So Amari Cooper, I think he'll bounce back this week. But, it's been an up and down season for him. Let's not lie. Crabtree, though.
Yeah.
Only 1 disappointing week all year, and that was in week 6. Last week, he caught 8 of his 11 targets for 96 yards and a touchdown. Classic Crabtree. Classic. Now that Latavius Murray is back, he is the #1 running back on this team. I don't know how many ways we have to say this. I wrote an article on Pro Football Focus about this. Courtney was the one who was all in on him last week. I thought he was going to still be injured, so I was wrong. Once he came back, it's like, yeah.
Yep.
Hello. And I just want to tell you that Latavius Murray played in 42 snaps last week. Okay. Next was Olawale at 25. Then DeAndre Washington, Mr. I'm going to come and save the planet, only played in 15 snaps. And I have totally lost myself here. And then Rashard was in 2 snaps. So, I mean.
2. Sad. Well, Wally's going to be the goal line guy if they're not giving it to Murray. So
we have to just stop.
It's going to
Murray, and I know that no one wants to play him, but when he carried the ball 18 times for 59 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's his game. That's what he does.
Game on.
Game on.
Undoing.
Deal with it. Deal with it. I'm doing the Big Lebowski with the sunglasses. Deal with it meme gif. Yeah, that's what I'm doing right here.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No.
If you haven't seen David S. Pumpkins, we haven't talked about in this particular show. Any questions? Check it out. There's always a chance that another running back's going to score a touchdown, but I don't know who it is, and nor does anyone else. So, and bench is Clive Walford. It's just not happening. Stop trying to make Clive Walford happen. I wanted it to happen too. He's only had 1 good game. It was in week 2 with 6 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown. Other than that, he's never had more than 3 catches or 27 yards and no other touchdowns.
Boom. Ashley, Buccaneers.
So Jameis Winston is another potential streamer this week. It's a good matchup. Raiders give up the 7th most points to quarterbacks. And for the most part, Jameis Winston has actually shown up and played very well against bad defenses. So I think you could be fine to play him in this situation. Now, he did it pretty good last week as well. 21 of 30 for 269 yards, 3 touchdowns. I'll take that. He had an interception, but I don't really care about the interception if you get me 3 touchdowns. That's fine.
That's right.
I'm fine with that. So he's somebody that you could possibly stream if you need to. Now, Mike Evans, again, guy gets targeted an insane amount, 13 targets. He caught 8 of them, which is a much better percentage than last year in terms of his completion percentage. So I'm okay with that.
Oh, yeah. He's a baller right now.
Yeah, he's doing good. He's doing good. Yeah, but he had 2 touchdowns and almost 100 yards. But you know what? No big deal. Oakland gives up the 6th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so he should have an amazing game. Play Mike Evans. He's going to be fantastic. There's been multiple receivers that have gone for over 100 yards against the Raiders, and Mike Evans will certainly be one of them. So play him. Jacquizz Rodgers, we talked about him again. We said that you need to play him. Play him. He had 154 yards. He had 26 touches. That is insane. This isn't like 10, 12, crazy. 26 touches. It's amazing. Now, the Raiders also is a good matchup. They give the 10th most points to running backs. So this should be good. And his coaches even said, feed the stud. I want that tagline. Feed the stud.
I had that on a T-shirt, actually.
Right. That'd be great.
I wear it to Golden Corral.
So we were Nebraska kids, and Golden Corral was one of the few actual restaurants within a near vicinity to drive to the neighboring town to go to our buffet. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, that was a big thing in our family. That buffet.
It really was. I used to double
It's not
down
the
on those
same
brownies.
anymore.
It
It's not
really
the
isn't.
same.
I actually went and I was so disappointed. I was like,
So
man.
disappointed. No offense, Golden Corral. I'm sure people love them. It's great. You have a clientele. But in Nebraska, we would get steak.
Yeah.
We got really
rib.
good stuff
Yeah.
at the Golden Corral. Not so much
No.
anymore.
Processed.
Yeah.
Tons of
Anyway.
Times they are a changing.
Feed the stud.
Feed the stud.
Feed the stud. So Doug Martin may come back. He may not come back. He did not practice Wednesday, so I'm not super optimistic, but you never know. Either way, I think you're playing Jacquizz Rodgers at this point in time until you see something substantial stating otherwise. They're going to be going to him. Even if Doug Martin does come back, I'm not sure. He's not fully healthy, obviously, so keep with him. Now, someone that's interesting is the wide receiver Russell Shepard, who was 5 of 6 for 77 yards and had a touchdown. So when Vincent Jackson went down on IR, Cecil Shorts was supposed to be the heir apparent who would come up and play, but he was not even targeted.
So weird.
It's bizarre.
I love Russell Shepard.
He was not even targeted. So it seems that Shepard actually is the one that's going to step up and take this role, really.
Do you remember one of the Tampa Bay beat writer that we talked to loved Russell Shepard?
Yeah. Yeah, I think
preseason.
he's going to be the guy. I mean, Cecil Shorts has always proven to be a boom and bust player. And this is an opportunity for Shepard to step up and really have a role here. So someone to look out and potentially stream. If you need to dig deep, if you're like me and you've got a lot of injuries on your team, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go get Russell Shepard. It's a good matchup. I feel really good about it. And then Peyton Barber is also a really interesting mix. If you're desperate, he did get the ball 12 times for 84 yards. And again, it is a good matchup. So I think there's potential in terms of he's got a really high ceiling here. There's a chance for a great game. A low floor. He could zero out on you, but is it definitely a good option if you need somebody that could possibly go off for you?
Boom. Seattle Seahawks 4-1. And the New Orleans Saints 2-4. I love it. I love it.
So bad.
The Seahawks. So, what a horrible game. Like, I'm looking at stats. Like, I don't even know what to say about this team. But Jimmy Graham, I will tell you this. He's being targeted a lot. He had 10 targets. Granny only caught 5 of them for only 53 whopping yards. But he is at least being targeted a lot. And I can't say the same for some of our receivers on this team. Now, Jimmy Graham did not practice Wednesday due to his knee, but I'm not too worried about this. This is more of just them resting, one of their vets, a somewhat injury-prone player. Don't read too much into this. And New Orleans gives up the 17th most points to opposing tight ends, so there's potential for him to have a decent game. Now, Christian Michael, not a good game, 16 carries, 52 yards. Or New Orleans does give up the second most fantasy points. So even though it's been a little bit rough for him, I think you have to play Christian Michael again because of buys, because we've got so many running backs that are down, so many that are in committee situations. Christian Michael, you have to play because it is such a good matchup. So put him in. I agree, you don't feel good about it, but you still have to play him. Doug Baldwin, man, he has been like non-existent right now. He had 69 yards, which I know isn't horrible. You can't terribly complain. But he has not had a good week, nor has he scored since week 3. The highest outing that he had was 6 points last week. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Now, New Orleans gives the 14th most points to wide receivers, but Russell Wilson, he is not himself. He sits there and constantly says that he's not hurt. It's not a big deal. Stop lying to us, Russell.
Just watch the tape. It's bad.
It's really bad. It's really bad. So I can't tell you to play Russell Wilson. The guy, this is shocking. He has literally scored in standard leagues 1 point more than Brock Osweiler. 1 point. He is the 24th highest ranked quarterback right now. He's not even remotely considered to be a starter at this point in time. So don't do it. If you need to really stretch for someone, Jermaine Kearse is someone that could possibly get you 4 or 5 points. If that's enough for you, then he's someone you could possibly stream this week. But again, he doesn't have a high upside at all. And they did release CJ Spiller. Just a quick one announce that he was released today.
Yeah, Brandon, the Saints.
Okay, on one hand, this is a tough defense. It's Seattle, right? Of course. But on the other hand, they're at home, and they always play well at home. So I'm going to favor the side of talent at home. I'm starting Drew Brees because he's a stud. Period.
Yeah.
Boom, especially at home. I'm starting Michael Thomas. Why? Because he is the #1 wide receiver on this team. I don't know how many times I need to tell you that. He has led this team this month with 26 targets for 19 catches and 252 yards. And then Brandon Cooks has back-to-back games with 9 targets, 7 catches, and a touchdown. In week 6, he had 173 yards. In week 7, he had 58 yards. But the whole point is, it's pretty respectable. I'll start him too. Sleepers, I'm putting Mark Ingram in there because his mediocrity just depresses me this season. It's going against Seattle. I think that they might shut him down. He has no games so far this season with more than 77 yards. He's yet to have more than 18 carries in a game. And Seattle has yet to allow 51 yards to any running back with less than 21 carries in the game. Yeah. So since they don't give him the work, it's just not going to happen. And then Willie Snead, he's still getting right? I mean, and last week he caught 9 of his 11 targets for 87 yards, which is great. But I just feel like he's kind of still the odd man out. I know that may not pan out, but he's on my sleepers list. And then bench, I'm not starting Kobe Fleener in this tough matchup. He's so inconsistent. He has 2 games with 16 or more fantasy points, but then all the other ones are like under 5 points in standard scoring. I can't take that. So I'm out.
Fleener. Detroit Lions 4-3 at the Houston Texans 4-3.
All right, so it's a tough matchup, but I believe Stafford's going to put up a solid 16 points. There's 6 teams on bye. I think that's probably going to be fine for a lot of people. It's a bad bye week. Houston gives up the 7th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. But let me tell you something, though. Here are the quarterbacks that didn't put up at least 20 points on Houston. I want to read this out loud so that you realize that I'm saying you should start other people as well. The other quarterbacks that have played against Houston: Jay Cutler, Alex Smith, Jacob B. Brissett, Marcus Mariota, Sam Bradford, and Trevor Siemian.
Yeah.
Way to stop those guys, Houston. Way to do that.
Feed the stud.
Meanwhile, Andrew Luck scored 23.38 points in standard scoring without bonuses. So I think it's a little inflated, just putting it out there. And that's why I also think it's a little bit inflated that supposedly they give up the 4th fewest points to opposing wide receivers, because if those are the quarterbacks, well, of course. So Marvin Jones is still getting the work. Now that Golden Tate is kind of back to form, it hasn't been as good. Same with Anquan Bolden. He's just the man right now. He hasn't gone for over 100 yards since week 3. That's Marvin Jones, that is. But he has scored 2 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. So I'm still starting him. I'm starting Golden Tate now, guys. Yeah. What a 180.
For those people who held on to him or bought him low.
Yeah, absolutely.
Congrats.
Week 6, 8 of 10 for 165 yards and a touchdown. Week 7, 6 of 12 for 93 yards. It is what it is. Again, I told you, he's hurt. He can't get the yards after the catch when he has an ankle injury. It got to the point where you probably had to drop him. But man, if you could pick him back up, congrats. And you know what's really crazy? So we have this stat in Pro Football Focus. It's about the quarterback rating throwing towards a particular wide receiver, okay? And so basically if you have that highest ranking, it's awesome. So Matthew Stafford has a 129.9 quarterback rating when targeting Anquan Bolden.
That's awesome.
3rd highest in the league. Yeah. You know what his quarterback rating is when he throws towards Marvin Jones? 133.0. That's the 2nd highest rating. The #1 rating is Dak Prescott throwing to Cole Beasley. Boom!
Oh.
Times they are a-changing. It's crazy out there. Theo Riddick is practicing, but on a limited basis, and I'm not touching anyone else on this team other than that, including Eric Ebron, who may or may not be back, but he hasn't been in for a long time. I'm out.
Yeah,
I've never touched.
So you're saying next year we need to draft Marvin Jones, Anquan Bolden, and Cole Beasley. I don't know if I can do that.
I don't know if I'm saying that yet. I'm saying if
that's what I heard, Courtney. Did you just hear her say
I heard her say that Cole Beasley is
Yeah.
The number one wide receiver in the NFL is what I
I
heard.
freaking love Cole
Mhm.
Beasley, though. You know that all year.
Well, it's Tony Romo's team, so when he comes back, we'll see about that.
Oh, no. Stop.
Right, Ashley, the Texans.
So I was doing my write-up, and I'm like going through, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to Yahoo, and I'm going to look at the top 25 of each position, and that's how I'm going to start my notes. So I'm going and doing my notes. And I literally, and even with the wide receivers, I went to the top 50. I went through the whole top 50 wide receivers for the week. I had 0 notes for Houston. Not one person fell into the top 25 in a category. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I have literally no notes on Houston. So we're going to brush through this really quick. Granted, it's against the Broncos, but I was just like, oh, shocking. Anyway.
Broncos are good.
They are good. And
Yeah.
poor Brock, because, we're Broncos fans, obviously. We've never hid that little secret.
I don't think it's poor Brock.
And
I only think poor is that we didn't hit him more.
well, our parents send us a text message that they had like Brock jerseys when you enter into the stadium, that so fans could like walk on top of the Bronco jersey.
Broncos jerseys.
Yeah.
So bad.
Classic.
It's really
So
sad.
good.
I was just like, oh man.
It's not sad, Ashley. It's not sad.
I just sent tear emojis. That's all I could
I
do.
felt bad about it a little bit.
I don't feel bad about it. Loser.
But so,
I don't feel bad about it though.
He's laughing all the way to the bank.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And
Did you
actually,
hear
he plays really well against bad defenses and at home. I think he's going to have a good game.
Oh, whatever.
Well, we'll talk
You
about
heard.
Lamar
I heard
Miller.
you. I can't wait to make fun of you.
So here's our situation. Lamar Miller, technically, as you know, is really the only potential must start on this team. Now, the reason I don't have him 100% the must start is because he does have a shoulder injury and is considered day to day. And he was limited in practice on Wednesday. Now, he had a split carry situation, which was unexpected. He only rushed for 11 times, which is like half the carries he gets on a weekly basis. The guy is always in the 20 touch count. And only for 61 yards, which wasn't horrible. But then Alfred Blue had an equal amount of touches in 11 for 63 yards. You may be looking at a split carry situation again here. But again, that might be enough for you. And that probably is still worth playing in a flex if you need to. Now, DeAndre Hopkins, we've talked about this. It's just getting out of control. He only had 5 catches for 36 yards. He was targeted 12 times though. But again, not all of those targets are good targets. So you can't necessarily hold that. Yeah, targets.
Targets. 20
quote,
feet over your
unquote.
head. Target.
Brock does not feed his stud. He does not feed his stud.
He's starving his stud.
He's starving. I need some
It's like juice fasting.
gosh, I need some Sarah McLachlan
Juice
to play right
fasting
now with
ways.
like the sad dog. And I need like someone needs to do a video for me of like literally Sarah McLachlan with the sad dog videos, but just DeAndre Hopkins' face being starved and touched.
Texans are raising money to bail the Houston Texans out of Brock Osweiler's contract.
Well, I
That's
will
how
say
bad it is.
I think it's unfair.
I think it's also unfair. I think he
It's
needs to give
unfair
it
to
couple
sign a guy
years.
who has yet to prove himself.
He was
for
bad
that much
against
money.
New England, Minnesota, Denver Broncos. Like people that listen, when Aaron Rodgers played the Minnesota Vikings, people thought that he needed to rethink his career. Remember?
Seriously.
What's wrong with Aaron Rodgers? So, I mean, I don't know. I'm cutting him a little bit of slack.
Heated situation. I mean, Brock has got some work to do for sure. The guy 100%
Not
needs to work
great.
on his accuracy.
Correct.
It's the accuracy for me is a problem. It's oof. But again, he did to some extent prove himself last year. To some extent,
I don't agree with that.
but
I'm with
I
Courtney
know.
on that.
But what I'm saying is, I
Absolutely
think he
not. He's
proves himself for
worthless.
someone to be willing to take a chance on him.
Not at that price,
72
though.
million? I don't think so. But he did prove himself as someone that you'd want to sign. What I find really interesting, and it's a complete random tangent, is Bill O'Brien being called the quarterback whisperer.
No,
Who in the world has he whispered? I mean, he has had every potential quarterback that should be whispered to between Fitzpatrick, Case Keenum, Schaub. I mean, he has had so many quarterbacks of these potential that could have been whispered sweet nothings to produce nothing. Absolutely
Real
nothing.
fast. If we're going to go on this tangent about Brock Osweiler, let's just be honest here. He has had turnovers in every single game except against Denver, okay? Not only that, but his
no, he did. He fumbled.
Okay. I'm sorry. Interception. An interception in every single game. So you're right. Turnovers in all of his games. His best game was 16.6 points. And you're right at Brandon. That was against Indianapolis and Chicago. He's only able to get 16.6. When KC was awful, he got 10.4 points. 15 points against Tennessee. He has gone up against defenses that are no bueno, and he still is no
Tennessee is a good defense.
Tennessee is a sneaky good defense. I will concur, but no. We're not cutting him slack, you guys.
I'm saying
awful. I'm saying
you
awful.
Gotta give him more than 8 games.
He has DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller.
All I'm saying is Bill O'Brien apparently needs to stop whispering and let's talk in a real tone, real voice at Brock, and actually help him out here. You quarterback whisper, you. But I agree with Brent. I think it's a little bit unfair to judge him entirely. There's a lot of quarterbacks in a new system that takes some time. A lot of money spent on him. I agree with that. But with that said, we spent a lot of time on the Houston Texans. I literally had 0 notes for initially.
Sorry.
But you really can't play anyone on this team. We can't play anyone on this team because we've got this delightful little Brock situation. And now we've got to potentially hurt Lamar Miller. So moving on.
If you didn't get the point, Brock's on the bench. New England Patriots 6-1. The Buffalo Bills 4-3.
All right. Well, the Bills are actually kind of a tough defense. So normally I just say start everyone. But I do want to say this. The Bills give up the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Brady threw for 406 yards his first week back, 376 his second week back, and 222 his third week back. So you start him, but just FYI, little heads up. Start Rob Gronkowski always, especially this year with no tight ends in the league. And then the Bills give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing running backs, if you can believe that. So you're starting Blunt and James White. James White has 3 receiving touchdowns over the last 2 games. Hello. Sleepers. Adam. By the way, also, I don't know how many times I need to put James White in our freaking waiver wires email, but I'm like, hello.
Back him up.
I have him ranked really high.
Yeah, he should be. And you know what? By the way, if you don't get our newsletter, please subscribe at herfantasyfootball.com. We send it out on Tuesdays, and then we also send you an injury report on Saturdays. Boom. Sleepers. Edelman makes me cranky. What? So bad. This is questionable due to a foot injury, but everyone expects him to play. But here's the thing. Last week he caught a season-high 9 passes, but only for 60 yards, and then he fumbled. He has no touchdowns on the season. It's just been bad. I don't know what to say about him. Bench, actually Buffalo gives up the 11th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, so I'm not messing with anyone here as a sleeper. And Martellus Bennett's questionable due to an ankle injury, was limited. He's boom or bust anyway, so he's on my bench as well.
Listen, to me, this could be a very defensive game. I don't want to say it's going to be Seattle, Arizona, 0.2, but it's going to be close to me. And maybe not. But I feel like both of these defenses are good.
A kick last week.
He's having a rough year.
So it could be.
Yeah. For the Bills, no one on this team is healthy, you guys. McCoy is listed as questionable, but I would think that after putting him in last week, that he probably is going to get re-injured again. So I would say he's more of a doubtful. I'd say most likely he's not going to go. As my sleepers, Robert Woods. Woods was out last week and remains questionable this week with a foot injury. He was limited at practice on Wednesday. If he plays, he's no more than a flex. Marquise Goodwin would be the guy this week, but he too is questionable, suffering a concussion last week. This is his 2nd time in concussion protocol this year. So that's not good. Again, if he does play,
he was such a good option, though. Man.
I know. Flex. Mike Gillislee. Gillislee is listed as questionable with a foot injury. He was limited in practice on Wednesday. Even though he might be the main back with Reggie Bush coming in, the Patriots give up the 8th fewest fantasy points to running backs. Bush did have a touchdown, but it was his only carry of the game last week. Sound familiar? I think we talked about somebody else who had 1 rushing yard for a touchdown.
But he played more snaps.
He played snaps and he got receptions. But I'm saying that against New England, who doesn't have any wide receivers to possibly to cover, they're going to be shutting down the run. So there's sleepers. There are worse options out there. But hopefully for you, there are better options.
Would you rather have Bush or Gillislee? Because I'm thinking Bush.
Bush is healthier.
But that was 1 week, you guys. The 2 previous weeks before that, Gillislee scored a touchdown, even with McCoy full go.
No, you're right.
So it's 1 week with Bush getting involved in the offense. So I don't know
how hurt Gillislee is.
Yeah, it does depend on how hurt Gillislee is. It's not like Bush is some guy who's like doesn't get injured too. I mean, the whole team's questionable. What's to say Bush isn't going to be questionable halfway through the game too? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it seems to be a theme here for the Buffalo Bills. So I think I would still go Gillislee, but I get it for Bush. Yeah. You have to see how these injuries go throughout the week. As far as the bench, I'm going to bench the only healthy guy out there, Tyrod Taylor.
Sad.
It is sad, but who is he going to throw to? You know, there's no one around him. Buffalo already had their good game against the Patriots. I don't think they're going to get 2. So I don't see this happening again, especially with Brady behind center. I just don't see the same mojo. Buffalo's defense I'm putting on the bench, and Charles Clay. We keep thinking Clay's going to come and be this thing. He's not. He's not. Again, listed as questionable with a knee injury, but you just can't trust him. New York Jets 2-5 at the Cleveland Browns 0-7. The Jets.
Oh, Jets. We'll get to some stuff, and then I'll get to the quarterback situation, which is all that really matters on this team anyway. Brandon Marshall, he didn't have a great game. He only caught 3 passes for 39 yards, but I don't want you freaking out about that because it was a very heavy run kind of week. Forte was running well. They just kind of stuck with the run. We had an injury to Geno Smith. Ryan Fitzpatrick came in. They didn't know what was going to happen. They ran, and I'm okay with that. Now, Cleveland gives up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers, so Brandon Marshall should be just fine this week. No need to panic. Quincy Enunwa, he doesn't get targeted all that much. He caught 2 of his 4 targets. Granted, it was for 73 yards and a touchdown.
Woo!
Which is great. Yeah, I have a hard time when you're not getting targeted very often playing him, but he does have upside. But that touchdown did come from Geno Smith, and it was in the first half, and he was virtually shut out after that. So it's hard because with wide receivers, it really does come down to chemistry with your quarterbacks. Now, granted, he has had some good games
inconsistent
with Patrick, but he's so inconsistent. You've got to hope that, you've got to hope for a boom. The Browns, it's the Browns. They give the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So you're hoping that this would be one of those weeks. So based on the matchup, I think you can play him, but temper your expectations. Robbie Anderson, he caught all 3 of his targets. Again, not targeted a lot, but it was for 41 yards. And he rushed for 30 yards, which is really interesting. So he is basically kind of solidifying himself as that 3rd wide receiver. So because we have so many teams on bye this week is the only reason I'm even mentioning a 3rd wide receiver on this team who's basically had 1 flash, but someone you could possibly look at if you really need to dig deep and maybe you need someone that you're hoping isn't going to zero out for you. Now, Matt Forte, he rushed 30 times. That's a lot of touches for 101 yards and a touchdown, and he had an extra 54 yards on top of that in the air and another touchdown. He did great. And Bilal Powell was really basically non-existent. He only had 4 touches compared to Forte's 30. So Forte was limited in practice, but I think this was mainly just them trying to, make sure Forte's healthy, vet rule kind of a situation. The Browns give up a lot of yards on the ground, almost 140 per game. So Jeremy Hill tore it up as we saw against the Browns. So I think you can expect Matt Forte to do the same. And then that takes us to our quarterback situation. You are benching both of them. Geno Smith goes in. He started to have a fairly decent game of 4 for 8, 95 yards. He came out in the second quarter. Had a touchdown as well. He has suffered a torn MCL and will be out for the season, which now puts Ryan Fitzpatrick back at the helm. And he was expressed some not happy about being taken out. But you know what? His coach is completely fine that he's pissed off as long as that means no turnovers. So maybe this will be a good thing. Maybe this is a fire under his belly. But what I will say is, and we've talked about this, they had a really hard stretch of games, and they are now entering into a much easier stretch of games. Last week was a good matchup. Cleveland is a great matchup. After this is Miami, which is another great matchup that gives up a lot of points to quarterbacks. The Rams come next, but they're middle of the pack technically. So he's got a good stretch of games coming here. So if you're in a 2-quarterback league, don't be afraid to play Ryan Fitzpatrick. I have him. I know he has gotten us like literally less than 1 point 1 week, but I think you can feel okay about him for the next few games.
Listen, if I was Fitzpatrick, I'd be pissed too. I mean, the Jets should have had him go down with a thumb injury.
Yep. Yeah, they should have been much more respectful.
Much more respectful. Anyways, the Browns.
Josh McCown might be back.
Woo!
He returned to practice and supposedly is humming the ball and quote unquote and has some quote unquote pep in his step. And after seeing his daughter's friends all in his jerseys, I believe it. That would make me excited too. I've accomplished something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He is expected to start, actually, and the Jets give up the 10th most points to opposing quarterbacks. I think if Josh McCown is the starter this week, I think they will get their first win.
Hey.
Against
Bold
your
prediction.
Jets, Brandon.
It's okay.
You're a Jet.
I'm just a realist.
You'll take one.
That's right. The Jets also give up the 4th most points to opposing wide receivers. So you'll start Pryor if McCown's in. Pryor is questionable with a nagging hamstring injury, but he keeps playing through it. So watch that injury report. I'm starting Isaiah Crowell. Last week, 12 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. Caught 3 of his 4 targets for 16 yards. He's back, especially if McCown's back. And Corey Coleman returned to practice as well. It's like Christmas.
It's Christmas.
Really.
So many presents. So many.
He practiced on a limited basis, and he's not allowed to catch the ball yet. So it's a long shot for him to start this week. But the good news is that he's back at practice, and he is on his way. Sleepers, Gary Barnage. You guys, I know, no touchdowns this year. But since week 3, he's put up at least 57 yards in every outing, 5 or more targets in every game other than his goose egg in week 1. And that was without McCown for the majority of this season. And weird, but he's 5th in the league for yards and catches. He just doesn't have touchdowns. That's why you guys think he stinks, but he doesn't. So if he's out on your waivers, go get him. Only 1 double-digit fantasy performance in standard scoring all year for Duke Johnson. And even in PPR, it's been... That could change with Josh McCown, but
Yeah.
I don't know. So he's on a sleeper list, but meh. And I'm not playing Ricardo Lewis or Andrew Hawkins, but they are 2 wide receivers I will consider playing in the future if Josh McCown is on the field.
Boom. All right, guys. 4:00 Eastern games. There's only a couple. Sad. San Diego Chargers 3-4. The Denver Broncos 5-2.
It's crazy how quickly these two are playing each other. They
I know,
literally
back
only
to
had
back.
like a 2-game break in between. Phillip Rivers, he had a great game against the Falcons. We all knew that game was going to be a shootout, and it was. 371 yards, only 1 touchdown, surprisingly, but still a lot of yards. 27 of 44 passes. That is a lot of passes to be throwing. But what I will say is, much like a few weeks ago when they played, this is a very tough matchup for Phillip Rivers. Denver gives up the 3rd fewest points to quarterbacks, while he is coming off a great week with his most yards of the season. He is now going back to play the Broncos, in which he only threw for 178 yards and 1 touchdown. It was not a good matchup a few weeks ago. And I think you're going to see something pretty similar this week. So don't expect big numbers, quite honestly, out of probably anyone on this team. But Melvin Gordon, I do not know why people are still not all on board with Melvin Gordon.
We had so many trade questions last week. I was offended.
Why don't
It's like-
people...
I don't
You
get
have
it.
Melvin Gordon. None of us have Melvin Gordon. Like, why would you do that? Why second guess it?
Melvin Gordon's another one I ranked really high this year. You're welcome. But he's been solid. He ran 22 times for 68 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. He had another 53 yards off 6 receptions. He was the highest scoring running back last week. Get on board. Get on board and play him. Now, I will say their coach, the running backs coach, Ollie Wilson, did say that they might try to lighten his load purely because he's getting so many touches. I think they clearly are maybe also a little nervous about injuries, as this team has suffered a lot of injuries. But I'm not sure they're actually going to give him that few more of touches. And even if they do soften it a little bit, I think his production will still be there. So I'm really not too worried about it. Denver, you can run on. So of everybody, Melvin Gordon's the one to play. They give up the 14th most fantasy points to running backs. And overall, they're allowing 116 rushing yards a game. So you can run on them, and Melvin Gordon will run on them. So make sure you play him. Tyrell Williams, I'm a little bit concerned with. He did play, and he actually caught 7 of his 10 targets for 140 yards. But he was not practicing on Wednesday. And he wasn't known to really suffer an injury apparently in the game, but for whatever reason, he's not really playing. So Denver gives up the fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. He did not have a fantastic time last time we played the Broncos. He was only 3 of 3 for 28 yards. I think it's going to be pretty similar. So I don't love that. So we got a potential injury there. Travis Benjamin's potentially injured still as well with his knee. I don't love that. So Dontrell Inman, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually has the game this week. He was 3 of 6 for 58 yards. He is playing in the majority of the offensive snaps. So I think you could possibly go with him. Check out Hunter Henry. He suffered a concussion. He's in concussion protocol, which meant that Antonio Gates then stepped up. He had 10 targets, but only for 38 yards. So if that's enough for you, okay. But I don't think it is. But Hunter Henry was limited in practice on Wednesday. But again, you need to check your injury reports to see if he is playing.
Boom. Denver Broncos. Listen, it would be easy for me to list off stats from 2 weeks ago when they played the Broncos or when they played the Chargers, but they're in the Broncos' house and the Chargers have already won one. So I just am not going to judge it by one game. I think this is the Broncos' game to redeem themselves against the Chargers, coming off a big win against Brock Osweiler. I just think that it is time. And if you remember that game, Brandon Ashley just kind of played it out. It wasn't the Chargers offense that won the game. It was the Chargers defense that won the game. And although the Chargers defense is okay in fantasy points, they've only had 2 games of 12 fantasy points. And all the others have been like 5 and 4. So it's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen. Demaryius Thomas, don't watch him play. It's like Mike Evans of 2015. It's not pretty, but he did manage to get you the double digits last week. He is listed as questionable, but he should be ready to go on Sunday. And I think he's going to score his 5th touchdown in the last 6 games. Emmanuel Sanders, you have to be okay with 8 fantasy points because that is what you're going to get. I have him ranked a little high, but he is consistently going to give you 8 fantasy points, and that is a lot better than you can say about a lot of the top wide receivers you drafted. So 8, Sanders is your guy. Mm-hmm. Denver's defense, Brandon McManus, they're both must-starts. As far as the bench, you guys, C.J. Anderson is listed as doubtful and will most likely miss a few games. Not just this week, but a few games. Go get Devontae Booker if he is still available, guys. Go get him.
Run, don't walk.
That's right. Run, don't walk. The Broncos have been working him into the offense the last few weeks anyway, so it's not like he's just going to be like picking up the ball all of a sudden. Last week, Booker had 83 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries. I think he's a must-start against the Chargers to give up the 6 most fantasy points to running backs. And Trevor Siemian, you guys, he has one big game, and other than that, he averages 10 fantasy points a game. He is Brock Osweiler. That's okay. Because that's what works in the Denver's game plan. Okay? That's why you should have taken the money. Green Bay Packers 4-2. The Atlanta Falcons 4-3. The Packers. Aaron Rodgers, thank God, had a good game. Had a huge game last week. Everybody had a huge game, except, of course, Jordy Nelson, and we will get to that later. But let's start off with Rodgers, a happy note. Aaron Rodgers had 326 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He is a clear must-start. Randall Cobb started his season poorly, but, man, he has bounced back after their bye in week 4. He has seen double digits targets and fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. Even though he's listed as questionable this week, he is practicing and should be ready to go on Sunday. Ty Montgomery. Here's the deal, you guys. We talked about this a little bit earlier. It's tough, right? Because in different leagues, they have him in different things. Because we know Eddie Lacy's out, James Starks is out, Ty Montgomery is the back. But you can only play him as the back in ESPN and in FanDuel. So as far as Yahoo and other sites, he's still listed as only a receiver. But gosh darn it, I think he's a fabulous receiver to put in. Put him in, you guys. He's a must start. He saw 13 targets last week as the back and 12 the week before. So with that kind of diverse player, I think he has to be in your lineup. I have no concern of Niall Davis taking over, taking too many touches away from him. I'm an all go. Jordy Nelson. Nelson saw a season low of 4 targets last week, and that was against the Bears. Started off so strong, but I am not losing faith in him yet, you guys. So keep it together. I am still starting him as a flex or a wide receiver 3. I think he will find the end zone this week. Because Devontae Adams is not going to have 16 targets for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns again. Gosh darn it. I swear to you, Adams, you are the worst player in the NFL. All right? Worst. He's so inconsistent, I can't even stand it. He did the same thing to us last year. He would be god-awful, so bad to the point where we would drop him, and then he'd be like the number 1 wide receiver.
Then boom.
The worst. The worst.
Great for daily if you need someone like that.
He's still a starter, all right? He's still starting, but gosh darn it. Mason Crosby's a starter. Sleepers, there's none. Bench, Green Bay Packers defense. Bye. It's the Falcons. It's Julio and Matt Ryan.
Yeah. Okay. So Tevin Coleman is listed as questionable, but no one thinks he's actually going to play due to his hamstring injury that took him out of the game last week. So you can count him out. That means you can definitely count on Devontae Freeman. And again, you can count on him before. He's just incredibly efficient and gets a bunch of work. Always start Julio. Green Bay also gives it the 12th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Feed the beast. Any questions? No. And then Jacob Tammy I have in my sleepers just because he keeps catching touchdowns. You could probably do worse in this bye week situation. So I had to put him out there. And then Mohamed Sanu, I'm not going to tell you to no.
It was Seattle. Okay. Yeah. All right. Sunday night game. Philadelphia Eagles 4-2. The Dallas Cowboys 5-1. Start. Philadelphia's defense. Duh. I don't care who they're playing. You have to start Philadelphia's defense. And that's all, you guys. The sleepers goes to Jordan Matthews. He's a 7-point wide receiver. That's it. That's all she wrote. Yep. If that's good enough for you, put him in as your flex. Ryan Matthews. Matthews has fumbled the ball in the 4th quarter in the last 2 games. He has also had only 6 fantasy points in the last 2 games in standard leagues. Coach Pedersen says he hasn't moved on from Matthews yet. So if 6 fantasy points is good enough for you, okay. Dallas gives up the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs. It's not going to be pretty. Zach Ertz. This is a great matchup for Ertz. But unlike most rookie quarterback tight ends, is not in Wentz's vision of how he's going to play this game.
Crazy.
He's had 3 targets in each of his last 3 games. Jack Doyle, as we talked about earlier, he's a much better option. Pick him up instead. Caleb Sturgis last week was his worst game with 7 fantasy points. And he's only owned in 15% of leagues, you guys. What? I think he's worth playing. Yeah. Hello. On my bench, guys, Carson Wentz. At this point, he is no more than a streamer. Dallas gives up the 13th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. But Wentz hasn't had over 180 yards in the last 2 weeks with a 1-to-2 ratio. So it's a big risk playing him, and I think there are better options this week. The Cowboys.
Well, yeah, San Francisco. This is a Sunday night. It's crazy. Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, anyone with that kind of volume needs to be started. Des Bryant is probably coming back. He had 102 receiving yards in week 2, a touchdown in week 3. I mean, he's hurt, but now he's back. I'm tempering my expectations, but I feel like he has some touchdown upside, so I'm okay with it. Cole Beasley again.
Number one wide
Jason must
receiver.
start.
Number one receiver.
Number
Number one.
Number one.
By the way,
number
also
one.
he works in the slot, whereas Dez is on the outside, so it's not even competing for targets. It's just beautiful. Dak Prescott only has one game of over 20 fantasy points in standard scoring. Philadelphia has given up the absolute fewest points to opposing quarterbacks. Supposedly, Tony might not be ready until week 9. Guys, I don't know what we're going to do with Tony Romo. Basically, this is me rambling to get to Tony Romo. I don't understand it. I think you should still hold on to Dak Prescott. If Tony Romo is available, you have to go with it. But
I'm betting Tony Romo gets a thumb injury in week 10.
Mm-hmm.
that's respect. So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And Jason Witten, no touchdowns on the season, averages 45.7 yards per game. That might be enough for you, depending on your league. Only you know how desperate you are. I can't tell you that. And then the bench with Dez back, you can't play Bryce Butler or Terrence Williams.
Boom. Monday night game. Minnesota Vikings 5-1. The Chicago Bears 1-6.
This would be a painful game.
Game of the week.
As was
Game of
last
the
week's
week.
game for the Vikings. I was like, is this seriously like 5 turnovers in a row, back to back to? I mean, it was like a circus.
It
Brutal.
was so good.
It was ridiculous. So, I really only have one must start on this team at the moment, and I don't even feel good about it. I don't feel good about it because Kyle Rudolph, who is great, did not have a amazing game. He still had 55 yards, which you can't be angry to get 5 points out of your tight end, but he had 11 targets. So you can't bench a tight end that gets 11 targets in a game. I mean, he gets targeted far too much for you to not play him. He is worth the risk of playing. Just do the targets. And it's not a great matchup. Chicago does give up the 10th fewest points to this position. But again, those targets. Oof. What I will say is they have held every single tight end they've played to 50 yards or less all season long. But I do think Rudolph will probably get 50 yards or less, but I think he'll be able to score. So this is what's going to push him above to still make him worth playing. I hope I don't have to eat my words on that. You better score, Rudolph. You better. Bradford really struggled against the Eagles. Again, very, very painful to watch. He was sacked 6 times and had 3 turnovers. So that hurt.
He's allowed a bad game, right?
He is allowed a bad game.
We let it slide.
This is it's the middle of the pack matchup. Chicago's at the 15th most points at quarterbacks, so it is what it is. I don't think you really need to play Bradford at this point in time, but if you're desperate, it's not a horrible matchup, and he's going to want to prove something after last week's game. So I'm most angry because my hand has been forced, ladies. I never want to talk about Cordell Patterson. In fact, I've boycotted him all season long.
Ranked him.
You have forced my hand. Patterson, excuse me. He caught 7 of his targets, and all 7 of them for 67 yards, and he had a touchdown. Chicago gives up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, so there's a great chance that he will do well this week. He scored in the last 2 weeks. Granted, they've been all kind of junk plays and some freaky plays, but that's fine. Points are points. So I think that he's somebody that if you need some high upside, he's somebody you can play. Obviously, Stephon Diggs, if healthy, you should be playing. Adam Thielen, I've talked about a few different times. Not targeted a whole lot, but he has been kind of someone that Bradford has kind of honed in on. So I think I'm okay with it if you need to stream somebody. Again, you need to be in a really crazy deep situation to stream Adam Thielen, but someone to think about with the buys. And then we've got a really bad running back situation here with Jerick McKinnon, who went out with an ankle injury. It's not determined whether he is going to play or not. So you got that really lovely situation of, is it going to be McKinnon? Is it going to be Asiata? I feel like it probably will be Matt Asiata just because they're going to want him on the goal line. So if I had to choose one, that's what I'm going with, but I don't feel great about it.
Boom.
And it's a bad matchup too, because Chicago gives the 6th fewest points to running backs, period. So even with the uncertainty of which one is going to be, it's a bad matchup. So just try to look elsewhere.
All right, guys. The Bears. Listen, Minnesota gives up the second fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks, second fewest to wide receivers, seventh fewest to running backs, and ninth fewest to tight ends. The struggle is real. Do not play any of them. I guess Alshon Jeffrey is a sleeper, as in, like, if you have to, simply because Mr. Jay Cutler miraculously came back from that terrible, terrible thumb injury. And Cutler and Jeffrey do love each other very, very much on the field. So I will give him that. Let me just say, average points for a quarterback against Minnesota is 11.8. Not good. Jordan Howard. Howard has been on a downhill spiral since his big game in week 5. It is so frustrating. You may need to find another running back for the rest of this season, you guys. Definitely this week against the Vikings, no bueno. For more info on the backfield for future weeks, Langford returns to practice this week. Kadeem Carey is seeing an increase of carries, but he's only had 5 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. So both of them is kind of like that's the situation right now in the backfield. And I'm going to have to put Cameron Meredith and Zach Miller on the bench. It's Minnesota, guys. It's Minnesota. Oh, yeah, Chicago's defense.
That too.
Obviously. All right, guys, it's week 8. Again, get them out of your lineups. The Los Angeles Rams, Miami Dolphins, New York Giants, Pittsburgh Steelers, San Francisco 49ers, and the Baltimore Ravens. If you guys have any questions, hit us up on Twitter at HerFantasyFB. Also, you can listen to our show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 9 to 11 Eastern on Saturday night. Until then, you guys, good luck and no more faking it.